You know, when Richard Dawkins published The God Delusion, it was so much more than just a book release. It was like a cultural bomb going off. It didn't just sell millions of copies, it kicked off this massive, worldwide debate that is still raging today. So what we're going to do is break down the anatomy of that debate, the core arguments, the fierce rebuttals, and really dig into why this conversation got so incredibly heated.
All right, let's just start right there. I mean, wow. This is the opening shot from the book's second chapter, and you can just feel the gloves coming off immediately. This was never going to be some quiet academic chat. This was a direct, pull-no-punches challenge, and it really set the tone for the entire new atheist movement that followed.
So here's the absolute core of his thesis. Dawkins wasn't just saying that he thinks religious belief is incorrect. He took it a huge step further. He argued that faith itself is a damaging force in the world, what he called a pernicious delusion, that has done and continues to do real harm to humanity. This moral claim is a huge piece of his argument.
Now, this is a really crucial move that Dawkins makes right at the beginning. He insists on taking the existence of God out of the realm of faith and philosophy and plopping it right into the lab. He says, look, if a creative superintelligence exists, that's a fact about the universe. And if it's a fact about the universe, it's a scientific question. This reframing of the whole debate is really the first major battleground.
And framing God as a scientific question leads him directly to this, the first major intellectual showdown. It's a question that seems almost childishly simple, but one that Dawkins argues religion just can't handle.
For Dawkins, this is the killer question. It's his checkmate. His point is, if you look at the amazing complexity of the universe and say, well, that must have been designed, you haven't actually solved the problem. All you've done is create an even bigger one. Now you have to explain an even more complex designer.
And this is the heart of his logic right here. He takes this classic religious argument, sometimes called the argument from improbability, and he just flips it completely on its head. He says, okay, you think life is improbable? Fine. But using an even more improbable being, a super intelligent God to explain it, that's not an explanation at all.
And this is where it gets so interesting, because you see two worldviews just crashing into each other. You have critics like the theologian Richard Swinburne, who argue that God is, by definition, the ultimate simple explanation. Or you have the Warren Christian Apologetic Center, which says the universe points to a designer who is simply outside of time and has no beginning. For them, God isn't the next complex problem, he's the final, simple answer.
So this clash over what even counts as a simple explanation really shows us something deeper. This isn't just about one argument anymore. We're talking about a fundamental conflict between two totally different ways of knowing the world worldview of science versus the worldview of faith. In one of his most famous debates, Dawkins' opponent, Dr. John Lennox, really honed in on this. He argued that Dawkins makes the mistake of thinking all faith is blind faith. Lennox's point was, look, you have faith in Einstein's theory of relativity, but it's not blind, right? It's based on a mountain of evidence. And he argues that religious faith can and should be built on evidence too.
So how do you solve this conflict? Well, one popular idea is NOMA, which was championed by the biologist Stephen Jay Gould. It's basically a stay-in-your-lane agreement. Science gets to handle the empirical stuff, the how the universe works, and religion gets to handle the big questions of meaning and morality, the why we're here.
But Dawkins? Oh, he is not having any of that. He completely rejects this neat separation. He argues that the second a religion makes a claim about the physical world, like a virgin birth or a resurrection, it is just stepped onto science's turf. And if it's making a scientific claim, it has to be judged by scientific evidence. For him, these territories absolutely overlap and collide. And this idea that religion makes claims about the real world, well, it brings us to what is maybe the most personal and fiery part of the whole debate. If science can explain where the universe came from, can it also explain our sense of right and wrong? In other words, can we be good without God?
This is the classic challenge, isn't it? It's thrown at atheists all the time. Dawkins' answer is that our morality doesn't come down to us from a holy book or a divine being. Instead, it comes up from our deep evolutionary past. It's a product of Darwinian selection.
In Dawkins' view, we can explain goodness through a Darwinian lens. We evolved to be kind to our relatives because it helped our shared genes survive. That's consolation. We learned that cooperation works. That's reciprocal altruism, the old you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And in social animals like us, having a good reputation was a massive survival advantage. So for him, morality isn't mystical. It's a useful evolutionary strategy.
But here's the counterpunch, and it's a big one.
Critics, like the Warren Christian Apologetics Center, point out that Dawkins himself uses words like good and evil as if they're real, objective things. But they ask, if morality is just a glitch in our genes that helped our ancestors survive, on what possible basis can you say that anything is truly evil?
And this really gets to the core of the pushback. For critics, a purely Darwinian morality just dissolves any kind of objective standard. If there's no higher source for right and wrong, then good and evil just become matters of opinion or cultural preference. They're not real.
From here, the debate often devolves into this grim finger-pointing at history. Dawkins and the new atheists will point to things like the Inquisition or religious terrorism as the fruit of faith. In response, critics like John Lennox will point to the officially atheist states of the 20th century, Stalin, Pol Pot, and argue that when you get rid of God, you unleash human evil on a scale never seen before.
But you know, this whole thing isn't just about the arguments themselves. A huge part of the firestorm around the God delusion was about its style, its tone. This was not a book that was asking for a polite chat.
A lot of critics, especially from philosophy and theology, felt that Dawkins just waved away centuries of really complex thought without even trying to understand it. This Reddit comment kind of captures that feeling perfectly, that his treatment of classic thinkers like Thomas Aquinas was just arrogant and dismissive. And that connects to this other major criticism. Many people felt that Dawkins was applying the rules of science to a domain that just doesn't play by those rules. It's like a category error. He was trying to measure faith and spirituality with a scientific ruler and fundamentally misunderstanding what he was looking at.
And in the end, even some people who kind of agreed with his points were worried about the result. There's this feeling that the book's aggressive, mocking tone didn't actually persuade anyone. It just made everyone dig in their heels, leading to more shouting and a lot less real conversation.
So when you boil it all down, you realize the debate wasn't just about whether God exists. It became a proxy war for these much bigger questions like, how do we know things? What even counts as evidence? And how are we supposed to talk to each other when we disagree about the most important things in life?
And that brings us right to the final, sticky question at the very heart of this whole thing. Does the burden of proof lie with the person who believes something to prove that it's true? Or does it lie with the person who doubts to prove that it's false? How you answer that one question will probably tell you exactly where you stand in this whole fascinating and unending conflict.